Court back in session. You ready to adjourn?
Your Honor, if I may address something?
Okay.
Yesterday, Your Honor, before the motion hearing, I brought up the issue of the conversations we had had with the state about what witnesses they would be calling. This makes the process go a lot smoother, allows us to be a lot more efficient, but also allows us to bring a lot of the gear that we need for the individual witnesses. We were informed yesterday of one thing, we're being informed of something differently today. I believe that the state, they had one of two choices yesterday, to say we're not going to share with the defense what witnesses we're going to call, or actually share the accurate witnesses. Instead, they've told us this is who's going to be testifying, and now it's, well, the lead detective may be testifying as well today, too. I believe that's dirty baseball.
Let's have a jury, please. All rise for the jury. Everybody be seated. Call your next witness, please.
State calls Joanne Maltese.
If you would face the clerk and be sworn, please.
Swear affirm testimony about giving this to be true, the whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God. I do.
Have a seat and slide up the microphone, please, ma'am.
Ma'am, please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your first and last name.
Joanne Maltese, Joanne, Maltese, Maltese.
How are you employed, Ms. Maltese?
Currently, I'm a business owner,
All right, and what about back in 2014?
a forensic specialist at the Tallahassee Police Department
How long were you employed at the Tallahassee Police Department?
for just over 26 years.
And were you a forensic specialist the entire 26 years?
Now, as a forensic specialist for 1999 to 2015.
All right, and what about before that?
Before that, I was in property and evidence section, and prior to that, a dispatcher.
All right, and what were your duties as crime scene analyst?
My primary duties as a forensic specialist is going to be the documentation, preservation, and collection of physical evidence at a crime scene.
And was that your position on July 18th, 2014?
Yes, it was.
Did you respond to a scene on Trescott Drive that day?
Yes, I did.
All right, and could you tell the jury just a little bit about what a forensic specialist does?
I will arrive at the scene, meet with a lead investigator. I will photograph, mark, and collect evidence.
And is that what you did on the scene on July 18th, 2014?
Yes, I did.
All right, and could you tell us a little bit about your training and experience and how to collect evidence that you find at a crime scene?
Training and experience, being a forensic specialist for over 16 years. I've gone at least 1,500 plus hours in specific training, advanced crime scene out of Miami-Dade, crime scene reconstruction. I also taught at the Pat Thomas Law Enforcement Academy, the police academy in this area, and I taught crime scene.
All right, and could you describe what the scene was when you responded on that date?
The entire scene, or?
I mean, was it like inside a house, in a yard?
When I arrived there, the roped-off area or the interior of the crime scene was the property line that consisted of the garage, a house, and a vehicle in the garage.
All right, and what testing did you perform in reference to specifically the vehicle in the garage?
I swabbed some of the areas, specifically the interior and exterior of the door handles for possible DNA, as well as fingerprinted, and prior to all that, photographing.
How do you collect evidence for the possible presence of DNA?
What we'll do is we will take a sterile swab and use sterile water and touch the area, rub it on the area that I'm potentially collecting DNA from, package it back in the sterile setting, and impound it to be sent off to Florida Department of Law Enforcement for analysis.
And in reference to the vehicle that was in the garage, in this case, what swabs did you take of the vehicle?
On the vehicle, it's going to be the exterior of all four door handles, meaning the rear passenger, the front passenger, the front driver's door, and the rear driver's door, the interior and the exterior of those door handles.
And would you be the person to test the swabs for the presence of DNA?
No, I would not.
Okay. What about fingerprints? What efforts did you make in this case regarding trying to find some fingerprints?
I dusted the entire exterior of the vehicle for fingerprints.
With what result?
A An area was collected, it was developed and lifted from the exterior rear passenger door frame, so around the frame of the vehicle, and it was determined not to be of value for comparison purposes.
What does that mean?
There was not enough information in that fingerprint lift, meaning there wasn't enough information to determine really what it really was.
So not all prints are of sufficient value to make an identification to a person?
Correct.
All right, and you didn't find any on this vehicle that were sufficient to make an identification to anyone?
No, I did not.
All right, and does that mean that no one ever touched any of those 4 door handles in the other areas that you mentioned?
No, it doesn't. And on the door handles, you're using a swab also, so that could potentially destroy any fingerprints, but the DNA is what investigators normally will choose to be collected.
Okay, so the swabbing for the possible presence of DNA could interfere with the fingerprints?
Yes,
And you kind of have to make a decision, because I assume lifting the prints could interfere with the DNA.
correct.
Okay. So in this case, a decision was made to do the swabbing first?
Yes.
Okay. And so we talked about, not the absence of fingerprints does not necessarily mean that no one ever touched the vehicle. We talked about the swabbing could interfere with it. Are there other things that could interfere with the fingerprint that was left on a surface?
You could wash your vehicle, road debris or dirt could come on the vehicle. A lot of different things could. Someone could brush up against the vehicle and not wipe it off. I mean, there's.
Are fingerprints always left on a surface that's touched?
No, they are not. No.
Could you explain a little bit about why that is?
When a fingerprint's left, it's the image of the fingerprints that are on your finger when you touch a subject or an object and you lift your finger off. If there's movement involved, you just get smudges, which can't be read. You could wipe it, you could pick something up and put it in your pocket, it's wiped off. Also, there's residue, there could be dust on your surface, so instead of leaving a fingerprint, you're just taking dust away, as well as you may not have any oils or residues on your fingerprints, on your fingers when you touch something.
I'm approaching with what's been marked as State's Exhibits 11 through 18. Please take a moment to look through each of those and let me know when you're done. You recognize States 11 through 18?
Yes, I do.
What are they photographs of?
Photographs of evidence collected from the vehicle.
Are they fair and accurate photographs of the evidence that you collected from this vehicle?
Yes, they are.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence States 11 through 18.
Any objection?
Not from Garcia, Judge.
No objection, Your
All
Honor.
right, they'll be admitted. You may.
What are we looking at with Exhibit 11?
Photograph of the interior of the rear passenger compartments of the vehicle.
All right, and these 2 car seats are located inside the vehicle?
Yes.
What about States Exhibit 12? What's that show?
A broken pair of eyeglasses that was on the garage floor between the door and the vehicle, the open door in the vehicle.
States Exhibit 13.
An eyeglass lens.
Where was this eyeglass lens located?
I believe that one is the floorboard of the driver's seat.
Okay. States Exhibit 17.
Is going to be the front driver's window,
And what were you attempting to capture in the photograph?
a hole in the window.
States Exhibit 16.
It's going to be an enlarged or close-up photo of that hole in the driver's window.
All right, is the hole consistent with a bullet hole?
Yes, it is.
States Exhibit 18. What does this show?
It's going to be the floorboard of the driver's seat.
All right, and what item of evidence were you attempting to depict in this photograph?
It's going to be an overall photograph, but in the photograph there is glass and a business card.
Business card here?
Yes,
Did you collect that item?
Yes, I did.
State's Exhibit 14. What is this?
Give me a wallet that I collected from, I believe, the glove box.
Was the glove box open or closed?
I believe the glove box was closed, but I'm not 100%. That would be one of the investigators.
Alright, State's Exhibit 15.
That is going to be the money and contents of, a photograph of money and contents of the wallet.
And are you able to see the identification card there? Well enough to tell us who appeared to be the owner of the wallet?
Not from this distance, but I might be able to.
I mean, if you need to refresh your recollection of your notes, that's accepted as well.
Yes.
You are able to tell us?
Yes,
All right, whose identification is there?
Mr. Markel.
I want to ask you about one other area regarding fingerprint testing. The back door knob, was that something that you tested?
As far as the entry into the house?
I just have back door knob. I believe it was an access to the house.
All right, I know I collected a swab of that.
And would that be the door that led from the garage into the residence or some other door?
Yes, the door from the garage into the residence.
All right. And that item was tested for, or it was swabbed for the potential presence of DNA?
Yes.
Okay. And again, the swab would interfere with the presence of fingerprints?
Yes.
Right. And again, you're not the person that tests that swab, it goes somewhere else for that?
Correct.
Okay. I want to ask you a little bit about the condition of the car, if you can just explain what condition or what things you observed about the car when you were processing it.
Car seats were in the back, children's items were in the back, broken window on the driver's side.
Did you observe any substance inside the vehicle consistent with blood?
Yes, I collected there was a towel with suspected blood on it, and I believe there was blood on the seat.
Okay. And did you note any casings or projectiles inside the vehicle?
No, we searched the vehicle and the garage for casings and projectiles and did not locate any.
Could you just briefly explain to the jury what a casing and projectile is?
In a bullet, what comes out of the front of the gun is the projectile, and a casing is what that is all in. It's ejected from either ejected, or if it's a revolver, stays in. But it's what remains with the gun.
All right, and none of those items were found inside the vehicle
Correct.
or anywhere else on the crime scene?
Correct.
All right. I want to talk about what you did impound. Approach with states 159 through 165. Start with states 159. You recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize it?
It is packaged with my signature and my handwriting on it.
And is that item in the same or substantially the same condition as when you impounded it?
Yes.
What is the item?
It's going to be the business card that was in the photo on the driver's floorboard.
And whose business card is that going to be?
Michael Strickland.
Judge, I asked him this item into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
Be admitted.
Next, I'm showing you what's been marked as states 160. Do you recognize 160? And I'm going to show you that together with states 161.
Yes, in my packaging.
How do you recognize these items?
They're both in my packaging with my signatures.
All right, and are they in the same or substantially the same condition as when you collected them?
Yes.
All right, from where, tell us what they are first.
Exhibit 160 is eyeglass frame that are collected from the front passenger floorboard. And State's Exhibit 161 is presumably the other side of the broken eyeglass frame that was on the garage floor between the driver's door and the vehicle.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence States 160 and 161.
Any objection?
Mr. Garcia.
No objection.
They'll be admitted without objection.
At this time, I'm publishing States 159. That's the business card that was in the vehicle.
Yes.
States 160 eyeglass from front passenger floorboard. States 161 eyeglass frame broken from garage floorboard front driver's door. Next, I'd like to show you what I've marked as States Exhibits 162 and 163, and ask if you recognize these items.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
They are in my packaging from the scene with my signatures and seal.
And are these items in the same or substantially the same condition as when you impounded the items?
Yes, they are.
All right, Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence States 162 and 163.
Any objection?
No, Mr. Garcia, Judge.
No objection.
They'll be admitted.
Ms. Maltese, States 162.
It's me the lens of an eyeglass.
From where was this located?
That particular one, I would need to see the other side. It's going to be from the front driver's floorboard.
Look at 163 and publish 162. And from where was, well, tell us what 163 is.
163 is a broken eyeglass lens.
And from where was that item?
That one was from the front driver's seat. Yes.
Show you what's been marked as States 164. Recognize 164.
Yes, I do.
What is that item?
Item number 164 is the brown wallet and the contents that were taken from the glove box.
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you impounded it?
Yes, it is, minus the cash money.
Alright, what happens to the cash money?
I have to impound that separately. It gets held in a separate vault in the property and evidence section.
Alright, and are you able to get a better look with this exhibit as to whose identification that is?
Yes.
And whose is it?
Daniel Markel.
Alright, Judge, at this time, I'd ask to introduce States 164.
Any objection?
No objection.
No objection.
All right, they'll be admitted.
Next, I'm going to show you States 165. Recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize this exhibit?
With my packaging and my originals, or my seals.
What is this exhibit?
This is the portion that I could collect out of the front driver's window.
Okay, so the same area that we were looking at in the photographs?
Yes, it's the piece of glass.
And how were you able to extract this without shattering it?
I used clear tape, and I taped both sides of the window before taking it out, so it wouldn't crumble.
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as when you impounded it?
Yes.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence States 165.
Any objection?
No, from Garcia.
No objection.
Be admitted without objection.
May I pass this one around for publication?
But you just kind of walk down it, show it to them.
So I'll need to scoot forward, okay? Ms. Maltese, were you also asked to photograph Wendy Adelson's vehicle?
Yes, I was.
And when and where did you do that?
That at 3 p.m. on the 7/18 of 2014 at the Tallahassee Police Department.
And was that the same date that you photographed the scene that we just viewed?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you State's Exhibits 19 through 22. Please take a moment to approve them and revise. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize them?
I took the photos.
All right, and are these fair and accurate photos of Wendy Adelson's vehicle as it was when you photographed it?
Yes.
All right. At this time, I'd ask to move an evidence States 19 through 22.
Any objection?
No objection from Mr. Garcia.
No objection.
Will be admitted. But they will be admitted.
Publishing States 19. Publishing States 20. Publishing States 21. Ms. Maltese, what is picture in States 21?
21 depicts a photograph of a plastic bag with an ABC liquor receipt and a bottle of alcohol that was observed on the front passenger seat.
And what brand of alcohol was this?
Small batch Bullet Rye Frontier Whiskey.
Bullet?
Bullet, B-U-L-L-E-I-T.
And State's Exhibit 22, is that a close-up photograph of the receipt?
Yes.
Approach with States 22 and ask if you can inform the jury when the receipt indicates that the bullet whiskey was purchased.
7/18/2014 at 12:49.
Did you go to the hospital to photograph the victim's injuries in this case?
Yes, I did.
Approach with 23, 24, and 25.
Your Honor, may we go sidebar?
Go.
All right, Ms. Maltese, back to 23, 24, and 25. Do you recognize these exhibits?
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize the exhibits?
They're photographs that I took at TMH emergency room.
Are they fair and accurate photographs of the condition of Dan Markel when you took these photographs?
Yes, they are.
All right, and tell us again when these photographs were taken, if you have any idea.
These were taken approximately 12:20 or slightly thereafter on 7/18/2014.
Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence, states.
Clarify, that'd be 20 minutes after noon.
Yes.
I always get mixed up on which is AM, which is PM, but it's 20 minutes after noon. Okay. 23, 24, and 25 will be admitted.
May I publish?
You mind?
Judge, I think I'd prefer to pass around 23, or I can walk down and do it if that's acceptable. I don't want to.
Okay.
Publishing States Exhibit 24. What were you trying to capture in this image?
A dark stain on his left arm, forearm.
This area here?
Yes.
And do you know what that dark stain is?
It's consistent with stippling,
What's different?
close contact to a weapon being fired. It'll be some of the gunpowder residue.
There's a pointer there. Maybe point out what you're talking about.
Area on the outside left forearm.
Right. And is States Exhibit 25 a close-up of that area?
Yes.
No further questions.
Cross.
Thank you, Judge.
Good afternoon, Ms. Maltese.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you some questions with regards to your investigation, if that's okay.
Okay. Yes, I don't do the investigation, I just do collection.
Well, your collection's part of an overall investigation, and that's what I was referring
Would
to.
you just get to your questions, please?
Yes, Judge, of course. I'm going to refer to State's Exhibit 7. Ms. Maltese, was that the view that you had as you were approaching 2116 Trescott?
Yes, the inner perimeter, yes.
And was the vehicle, as photographed in this picture, in the same position as it was when you got there on that day?
Yes.
And I believe if you look closely, you can see that the driver's side door and the passenger side door are both open.
Correct.
Were you able to take a measurement from the left portion of the vehicle to the wall on the inside of the garage?
I completed a sketch that had measurements on it.
And roughly, what's the distance, if you recall, from the left exterior of the vehicle to wherever there were items inside the garage?
I would have to see that sketch to determine that.
Did you bring that sketch with you today?
No, I did not.
Did you
It's-
trim?
It's part of evidence. It was impounded as evidence.
Okay. And you don't have an independent recollection?
No, I do not.
Did you write that information in a report that you drafted in conjunction with this investigation?
No, it would have been written on the sketch and impounded as evidence.
Were there, well, let's eyeball it. Would you say it was a few feet?
I couldn't even guess at this point. I have not been there since that day.
As a crime scene analyst, by simply looking at that photograph and using your common sense and your experience,
Please answer your question. Move on, Mr. Singleton.
May I see the photograph? Here it's too dark for me even to determine where anything is.
actually,
There's not a question. We'll ask another question.
sure, no problem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide Government's Exhibit 9. That's a closer view of the vehicle positioned in the same exhibit, well, in the same position as it was in Exhibit 7 for the government. Is that correct?
Yes.
Judge, may I approach the clerk?
What's that?
May I approach the clerk to give this exhibit back?
Why don't you just ask, move on. We can get him at the end.
Based on this exhibit, which gives a closer rendition, can you give a guesstimate of what the distance is from here to here? roughly?
3 to 4 feet?
And you'll agree with me that close to where the driver's side door handle, or the driver's side door, there are items directly behind and next to that position. Is that correct?
I don't recall if those coolers that you see in the photograph to the left-hand side were behind the door, which would mean there would be nothing next to the door open to the vehicle. I mean, to the door, the house.
So those coolers were in front of where the door would be, correct?
It appears in those pictures that it's in front, or
And are those-
behind.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Behind.
Behind. So if somebody was standing close to that window, where would the cooler be in conjunction to that person? If somebody was standing, pardon me, if somebody was standing right here, would the cooler be in front of them to the right?
If I can recall, it'd be behind them if they're facing the door.
Was any forensic examination, whether it's DNA swabs, fingerprints, done on any of the items to the left of that photograph?
No.
So let's go through it. The cooler, the blue cooler on the bottom, no forensic examination was done on that cooler, correct?
Correct.
The white cooler above it, was any forensic examination done on the white cooler above it?
No, it was not.
Any of the other items that are not photographed, well, let me ask this. Were there other additional miscellaneous items behind, and when I mean behind, I mean closer towards us with regards to the white and blue cooler?
Yes, I believe there was a shelf.
Okay. And was any, you indicated that you guys did was it a DNA swab on the door handle to get into the house?
Yes.
Was any kind of forensic examination done with regards to the shelf or any of the items on the shelf?
No.
Was there any evidence to suggest, well, let me ask you this. There was broken glass on the floor, correct?
Correct.
And was it in any kind of specific pattern, or was it in a random pattern?
As if it fell out when the door was opened.
When you got there, had Mr. Markel's body been removed from the vehicle?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that EMS came and, well, let me ask you this. Did they photograph the pattern of the glass prior to EMS coming and removing him from the vehicle?
I don't know what was done prior to me getting there.
As a member of this investigative team, have you seen any photographs that capture what pattern that glass potentially would have formed prior to EMS removing Mr. Markel from the front seat of his vehicle?
No, but if there were any, I would not be privy to that.
Do you know the dimensions and the height from the floor to the ceiling of that Honda Accord?
It would be on that sketch.
On the sketch, okay. Pardon me 1 second, Ron.
You may.
Nothing further from Mr. Garcia.
McMahon,
No, Your Honor, no cross. We're all
any redirect?
No, sir.
All right. Any juror have a question of this witness? All right, you can step down. We want to keep her further?
No, Your Honor.
Anybody need her further?
No, Judge.
No, Your Honor.
All right, you're excused. Call your next witness.
Yes, sir. The state calls Kerri Rosana.
You face the clerk and raise your right hand, please, ma'am.
You swear affirm testimony about giving this case to the truth, no truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do. Please introduce yourself and spell your name.
My name is Kerri Rosana, Kerri Rosana.
Sorry, jumped the gun. How are you employed, Ms. Rosana?
I work as a forensic examiner with the Virginia Department of Forensic Science in Richmond, Virginia.
And where were you employed back in July of 2014?
I was working with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Laboratory in their forensic biology section.
How long did you work in that capacity with FDLE?
As a crime laboratory analyst, I was with FDLE for 3 years.
All right, what about before that?
Prior to that, I worked as a forensic technologist with FDLE and also in their DNA databank.
All right, what is your training and education in the area of DNA analysis?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in biology with a minor in chemistry from the College of New Jersey, and I have a Master of Science degree in genetics from Pennsylvania State University.
All right, what were your duties in the crime lab at FDLE?
My job was to examine items of evidence for the presence of biological materials, and then I performed DNA testing on those items. And I also would perform DNA testing on samples known as standards, which are collected from known individuals. And then I would compare the results from those standards to the results from the evidence to see if that person could have contributed to any DNA found on the evidence.
So the comparison process only comes into play if you find a DNA profile on the swabs from the items, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Were you provided any test swabs to test for the presence of DNA in reference to the death of Dan Markel?
Yes.
All right. And can you tell us specifically whether you were provided any swabs from the car in the case?
Yes, I was provided 4 swabs from different door handles from the car.
All right. And what testing did you perform on those swabs?
The testing that I perform uses a process called PCR, which stands for polymerase chain reaction, and it's a way that I'm able to identify specific areas in the DNA that are known to vary from person to person, and I do that process on both evidence samples and known samples, and then compare them.
All right. And what was the result of your testing of the DNA swabs collected from the car?
For the DNA swabs collected from the car, I obtained limited results, which means I did not develop very many DNA types. And because of that, I couldn't make any comparisons to those DNA results.
And what, if assuming someone touched that car and shed some skin cells, what could interfere with your ability to collect enough data to make a comparison?
So there are a number of factors to consider. If DNA had been deposited, then the UV light from the sun or heat or moisture can break down the DNA, which would result in limited results. Also, if someone touches a surface, it's not guaranteed that DNA will be left behind. So there are a couple different things that can affect that, such as the length of time they touch it. So if it's very brief, it's less likely. If they hold something for a long time, they're more likely to deposit DNA. Also, the frequency, the last time they washed their hands. If they've just washed their hands, there's going to be less free DNA potentially than if it's been a while since they washed their hands. Also, the force of the contact, the surface, whether it's smooth or rough, all of those can affect whether DNA is deposited if a surface is touched.
So basically nothing of value from the car as far as DNA swabs.
That's correct.
All right, let's move on to the doorknobs. What swabs were you given to test in reference to doorknobs?
I had a swab of an exterior doorknob to the house from the garage.
All right, and what testing did you perform on that item?
The same DNA testing as I previously described.
All right, and with what result?
Again, the result from that was limited DNA results, so I couldn't make any comparisons to that sample.
No further questions.
Well,
No cross from Mr. Garcia, Judge. No problem.
No cross, Your Honor. Thank you.
any juror have a question of this witness? All right, we need to keep her further?
No, sir.
Anybody need her further?
No, thank you, Judge.
All right,
No, Your Honor.
you're excused, thank you for being here. Call your next witness.
State calls William Kornegay.
Come on up here, please. If you face the clerk, raise your right hand and be sworn.
You swear from testimony about giving this case to the truth, whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do. Have a seat, slide up the microphone, please, sir.
Please introduce yourself and spell your last name.
My name is William Kornegay, Kornegay, and I'm a forensic specialist with the City of Tallahassee.
How long have you been with TPD?
Approximately 24 years
And have you always been a forensic specialist?
with the city, correct.
What are your duties as a forensic specialist?
Document crime scenes, collect evidence, preserve evidence, and process evidence.
All right, did you assist Joanne Maltese in the collection of evidence in reference to a scene on Trescott Drive on July 18th, 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
And what time did you arrive at the crime scene?
12 o'clock.
What was the status of the forensic examination at the time that you arrived?
It had already been in progress when I arrived, and I believe it was pretty much, well, it had gone through its process, and I was at the tail end of it.
Okay. What role did you have at the scene as far as processing items or collecting?
At that scene, I assisted Ms. Maltese with processing a vehicle that was in the garage for latent prints, and basically doing eye search on the scene for other evidence.
All right. Did you locate any fingerprints?
No, ma'am.
All right. Did you, we put the cart a little bit before the horse on this, but did you swab the doorknobs for potential DNA?
No, ma'am.
All right. Was Joanne Maltese responsible for doing that?
She was a primary, yes, ma'am.
All right. Did you note whether or not the doors were locked to the residence?
I don't believe I noted. At that particular time, I didn't have any involvement with the residents inside.
You did not go inside?
I believe there might have been an open door in the garage, but I don't remember anything that was processed inside the house.
All right. By the time you arrived at the crime scene, the door to the garage was open, meaning the access to the house?
I believe it was.
Okay. Did you look for casings at the crime scene?
I did.
And was part of your job to look around the yard area, the driveway area for the presence of casings?
Correct.
Also in the garage?
I looked as much as I could within the scene, yes, ma'am.
All right. Did you find any?
No, ma'am.
Are you familiar with firearms?
I am.
What are the possible explanations, assuming a firearm was fired, for why there would not be the presence of casings?
Could be a...
I'm gonna object, this is speculation.
Overruled. Go ahead. It could be a revolver. It could be a semi-automatic that could malfunction.
All right. Why would a revolver not produce a casing?
They would have to be manually ejected from the weapon.
All right. So when a revolver is fired, the casing does not eject?
Not automatically.
Okay. And a semi-automatic does eject a casing, correct?
If it functions correctly.
All right. And a third scenario that you didn't suggest is somebody could have picked them up?
That's the third one, yes, ma'am.
All right. Did you attend the autopsy in this case?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you collect any items of evidence from the autopsy?
I did.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as 167 and 168. Do you recognize these items?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
How do you recognize them?
The packaging is our packaging, the handwriting's my handwriting, and the seal that's on the envelope packaging is my seal with my initials and 3 digits.
And do the items appear to be in the same or substantially the same condition as when you encountered them at the autopsy of Mr. Markel?
Yes, ma'am.
What are these items?
They are, my understanding, projectiles from a handgun.
Okay, and from where were these items collected?
These were actually received from Dr. Clark, who removed them from the victim.
From the victim's body?
Yes, ma'am.
So this time I'd ask to look at evidence 167 and 168.
Any objection?
None from Mr. Garcia.
No objection.
To be admitted without objection. Good night.
167. One moment, please, John. No further questions.
Cross?
None from Mr. Garcia.
No cross, Your Honor.
All right. Any juror have a question of this witness? All right. If not, you can step down. Do we need to keep him further?
No, sir.
Might need him further.
No objection.
No, Your Honor.
All right, you're excused. Thank you for being here. Free to go about your business. Call your next witness.
State calls Shawn Yao.
Warren, please?
You swear affirm testimony about giving this case to be true, whole truth, and nothing but truth, so help you God.
I do. Have a seat. Slide up the microphone, please, sir.
Please introduce yourself and spell your name.
My name is Robert Shawn Yao. The last name is spelled Y-A-O.
All right, Mr.
How
Yao.
do you spell Shawn? A couple of ways of doing that.
Shawn is spelled like it sounds, S-H-A-W-N.
All right, sir, how are you employed?
I am the current forensic supervisor at the Tallahassee Police Department.
And what are your duties at the Tallahassee Police Department?
Currently, as a forensic supervisor, I perform the day-to-day operations of the unit, ensuring that there are forensic specialists available to respond to requests for assistance for crime scene processing or forensic examinations for the city of Tallahassee. I also respond when needed to go ahead and assist and help process scenes or to offer any kind of advice or assistance to my forensic specialists on the scene.
How long have you been so employed?
I've been with TPD for almost 6 years. I started in November of 2013.
What about before that?
Prior to that, I was a senior crime laboratory analyst in the crime scene section of the Tallahassee Regional Operations Center Crime Laboratory at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
How long did you do that?
I did that for 19 years.
All right, and could you tell us a little bit about your training and education in the area of forensic examinations?
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in microbiology from Auburn University. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in criminology from the Florida State University. And I have a Master's in Criminal Justice Administration from Southern Columbia University. At FDLE, upon hiring, I went through a very rigorous training program to prepare me for the collection, preservation, and collection of physical evidence with regards to the various forensic disciplines that FDLE has. This is training in the collection, recognition, and preservation of things like latent prints, firearms, DNA, toxicology, computer evidence recovery, and a variety of other more specialized trainings to enable me to do what's known as crime scene analysis or forensic crime scene analysis, which is what my certification was in. Trained in the documentation and collection of forensic entomology evidence, which is insect evidence, forensic archaeology and anthropology, the recovery of buried bodies, buried remains, and surface skeletal remains, bloodstain pattern analysis, trajectory analysis, hazardous weapons and weapons of mass destruction, responses to scenes for hazardous materials, environment, and a variety of other training. The training for primary, takes about a year. Textbook learnings, practical examinations, as well as going to specialty courses, and then going through a supervised casework period where I made the decisions and processed the scene under the supervision of a certified analyst. At the end of about a year, you're certified to respond and perform independent casework as a crime scene analyst with FDLE. And then the training after that is continuous from there on throughout your entire career.
You mentioned trajectory analysis. What is trajectory analysis?
There are two forms that we utilized in my training that I was trained to do. One is bullet path documentation. Bullet path documentation is the proper form and technique to document how bullets pass through objects and where they go. In order to do a trajectory analysis, which allows an examiner to take the documentation and the evidence that I preserved and determine the most probable point of origin of the projectile where it originated based upon its terminus as well as other items of physical evidence that were present at the scene.
All right, and did you conduct any analysis in reference to the trajectory on the case that we're here about today?
No, I did not.
All right. Have you reviewed some items of evidence in order to consult regarding the trajectory in the case that we're here about today?
Yes, I did.
What items did you review in preparation for your testimony today?
I was present on scene at the time of the primary processing. I also reviewed forensic specialist 2 Joanne Maltese's report as well as the medical examiner report. I took a look at the photographs that FS2 Maltese took, as well as the sketches that she created in conjunction with her examination.
All right, and is trajectory analysis a topic upon which you have previously been qualified as an expert?
Not in the analysis per se to determine the point of origin, but in bullet path documentation and evaluation of those bullet paths.
All right, and do you have any opinion about the bullet path in this case?
May we come sidebar?
If you wish, before Dyer.
There's something I want to bring to the court's attention.
We'll let the jury step out. All right, everybody be seated. Take a proffer of his testimony. Kappelman.
Mr. Yao, I asked you to review the evidence in this case and offer me an opinion on whether or not the shooter, or the evidence is more consistent with the shooter in this case being a taller individual versus a shorter individual. We're talking about the difference between 6'1" and like 5'4"-ish. Did you review the evidence and formulate an opinion as to the bullet path in this case?
In looking and based upon the deposition testimony I gave previously, I took a look at the medical examiner's report because I had never seen the deceased, nor the injuries, nor a report on what type of injuries they had. During the deposition, I testified that based upon the height of the projectile hole in the window, that anybody from it would be consistent with both a short as well as a tall shooter. So, in looking at the injuries to the deceased, and in assuming things that were brought forth in the deposition, assuming that the individual is firing in a normal manner rather than in some weird manner of holding the firearm, a normal extended arm shot into the window, and assuming that the deceased was sitting in an upright position and looking out the window or looking toward the shooter at the time the shot was fired, using those assumptions, based upon the evidence that's present and what I was able to see, the injury and the hole in the window is more consistent with somebody of a taller stature being 6 foot or higher, or close to 6 foot, rather than somebody being shorter.
And how do we know that from the evidence that you just listed?
The height of the hole that's in the window is approximately 49 inches from the floor of the garage. If you look at a standard 6'1" person, their approximate shoulder height is somewhere around 58 inches, if you just as a standard, or as a general rule of thumb, or if you measure somebody approximately that height. Somebody about 5'4" is going to be significantly shorter. If somebody fires in a normal course of manner with the arm extended with a pistol, somebody that's short, where their arm shoulder height is approximately 48 inches or 49 inches from the ground, is going to have a more direct or parallel line to where the hole is in the window. Versus somebody that's taller, it's going to be more of a downward angle. The initial projectile strike that goes into the deceased strikes the left cheek. It's a slightly downward angle from right to left where the projectile ends up behind the left ear. There's pseudo-stippling around the injury, which is consistent with the breaking of the window. So because of the downward angle, if you assume that the person is sitting upright at the time the shot was fired, connected to the hole in the window is more consistent with somebody being taller firing at a downward angle into the passenger compartment rather than a shorter person firing where it would be almost parallel. That strike would have been more straight across and into the deceased rather than at a downward angle into the deceased.
All right, thank you. That's the proffer, Your Honor.
And the defense has its objection to that.
Yes, Judge.
All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to call another witness, Ms. Kappelman. We'll let Mr. Yao stay to the end of our day. I'll depose him at the end of the day after the jury's gone. We'll recall Mr. Yao tomorrow. All right?
Yes,
So take 5 minutes and you can call your next witness.